Welcome to Naresh Technologies. My name is Mahesh. I'm taking Java and Android classes training in Naresh IT. So, in my previous video, I explained about this, what is the need of web services in the mobile application development. Okay, and we understand that there are two types of web services. One is the SOAP-based web service, and second thing is the RESTful web service. Okay, so in this video, I'll explain you what exactly this SOAP-based web service is, internally how the communication will happen from one technology to another technology by using this SOAP-based web services. Of course, the people calls it say legacy web service, I mean the old style of creating the web services, but in these two types of web services, I told you, right, security is a major concern in case of the SOAP-based web services, meaning the SOAP is providing the more security than RESTful web services. So in few places, of course, it's preferred to use a RESTful web service. In few places, still you can find the use of SOAP-based web services. Okay, so in this video, I'll explain you what exactly the SOAP-based web services, how the communication is happening with other technology by using what the SOAP-based web services. In SOAP-based web services communication, mainly there are two actors in the web service. The two actors are nothing but one is the web service provider, the second thing is the web service consumer. Mainly in these web services, the SOAP-based web services, there are two actors in the web service. One is the web service consumer is one thing. One is web service consumer. Second thing is the web service provider. These are the two actors in the web service consumer and web service provider. And here Android applications or Android or iPhone or Windows or these kind of applications are always, it's a consumer technologies, not the provider side. Meaning we can consume the web service, you can consume. We cannot provide the web service, you cannot provide. Who are the providers? Either it may be a Java, .NET or PHP, any one of these web technologies are the web service providers. Okay, let's take here, for example, I have a requirement of communicating with the .NET system, okay, and here the consumer side, let's say we are using a technology called Android. Android means we know that which programming language we use for developing this Android applications, Java. I am developing an Android application I have a requirement of communicating with some server side technology called .NET. So .NET is a provider. So in our previous video we understand that we cannot provide a communication between two different technologies, you cannot provide a communication directly. So if we send a Java, .NET system cannot understand the Java code. At the same time, if you get the .NET response, Java system cannot understand the .NET response. That's the problem, right? And we understand that internally the data has to be transferred. Don't send the data either in Java or .NET. Okay, so send the data in a common language like XML or JSON. So here the SOAP web service supports only the XML as a data transfer. The SOAP web service will not support the JSON. Another thing is nothing but, let's take a consumer wants to communicate with what? Provider. If you want to communicate with the provider, we require few details are required. Let's take for example where the provider is located. I mean, by calling which URL we are going to get the information, and a single web service can provide n number of services. A single web service can provide what? N number of services a single web service can provide. What are the inputs we have to give and what is the response we are going to get? Who is going to provide this complete information? Let's take for example one provider I found for getting the weather information. Let's take for getting the weather information, I got one provider I got. Let's take what is the inputs we had to give to get the weather information. Whether I had to send my city name I had to send to get the weather information, or I have to send the city name along with the country name, or the zip code is sufficient to get the weather information. I mean, we are visualizing, we are imagining, okay, these are the parameters maybe we can send, and we are going to get some response. But we should not visualize, right? Because we don't know what is the parameters it is taking at the provider side, and in which format you are going to get the response. That details we don't know, right? So that's why the first thing, if you want to communicate with the provider, if you want to communicate with any provider, if you want to communicate, first we require a file called WSDL file. In case of the SOAP-based web services, the most important thing is what? WSDL. So in case of SOAP-based web services, if you want to communicate with the SOAP-based web service, if you want to communicate with the provider, if you want to communicate, the first thing we require the WSDL file. WSDL is termed as web service definition language or web service description language. If you want to communicate with provider, if you want to communicate, we don't know anything about the provider side, like what are the services it is providing here, in which format we are getting the response, what are the input parameters we have to give that particular service. We don't know anything about the provider. That's why after creating the web service provider has to write a file called what? WSDL file, a web service definition language or web service description language. What this WSDL file will do is, it provides a complete description. The name itself is describing web service definition or web service description language. This WSDL file is going to provide the complete description about the web service. What are the parameters we have to send? How many services it is providing here? What is the response we are going to get? Like each and everything about a web service, who is going to provide? WSDL is going to provide that information. This WSDL is also nothing but it's an XML file. This WSDL file is going to give the complete description about the web service. If you want, we'll show you. You will see some sample web service WSDL files. We'll see so that you will understand what exactly WSDL file is. Okay. So I'm typing in Google. Let's take. I'm typing here weather WSDL. Weather WSDL. We can find some weather WSDL file, cricket score WSDL file, and you can find a lot of WSDL files you can find here. Again, there are two types of WSDL files you can find here. One is a private WSDL, second thing is public WSDL file. Public WSDL means like this, anyone can access. Anyone can access like this, it's a public WSDL file. But private web service means nothing but, the other people cannot access that WSDL file. Meaning that's secret information. That WSDL file cannot share with any other people. That's a private web service. Okay. Okay, we found on web service, we found here a WSDL file we found here, global weather WSDL. I told you right, it's an XML file, it's a WSDL file. This WSDL file is nothing but one XML file. This WSDL file is going to give the complete description about the web service. Come on, it's an XML file, it's having a huge amount of data it's having. How can you understand this XML file? What are the services it is providing? What are the inputs we have to give? And how to understand this WSDL file? So it's difficult, right? It's difficult to understand this WSDL file, the whole WSDL file, because it's an XML file, it's having a huge amount of data. That's why we are having a tool called SoapUI is a tool. What is the tool name? SoapUI is a tool. By using that SoapUI tool, if you give this WSDL file, if you give as the input to that SoapUI tool, it is going to give the clear information like what are the services it is providing, okay, and what are the inputs we have to give, that kind of whole information. So easily we can identify by using that SoapUI tool. Of course, we can understand by following this WSDL file also, but you require some more knowledge, in-depth knowledge is required. What exactly about each and every tag you have to understand in case of the WSDL file. If you want to understand, you have to understand each and every tag. What is the purpose of this complex type? What is the purpose of this element? And all the things you have to understand. So clearly, if you want to know the description about the web services of WSDL file, just copy this WSDL. Copy this WSDL. I told you right. There is a tool called SoapUI is a tool. What is the tool name? SoapUI is a tool. To this SoapUI tool, if you give that WSDL, if you give input, you are going to get the list of services, what are the parameters you have to send. That information easily we can identify by using this SoapUI tool. So I am opening this SoapUI tool. SoapUI is a tool. It may take some time to start. So go to file, and here you can find an option called a new SOAP project. File, new SOAP project is the option. You can find this new SOAP project and see the second parameter here. It is asking the WSDL file, initial WSDL file. Let's place a WSDL file here and click on this OK button. Place the WSDL file and click on OK. And very simple here, you can find the web service description. You can find here this particular service is providing two services. I told you right, a single web service can provide what? N number of services a single web service can provide. Here there are two services are available. One is get cities by country is one service. One more thing is get weather is another service. Get cities by country is one service. One more thing is what? Get weather is another service. If you select this get cities by country, this is one particular service. This is one particular service. There is a request. Click on this request. You will get the information you will get. I told you right, a single web service can provide n number of services. This particular web service is providing two services. Get cities by country is one service. One more thing is what? Get weather is another service. I open this get cities by country, I open here. See how many parameters it is taking as input? It is taking two parameters it is taking as input. It is taking only one parameter is taking as input. What is the parameter? Country name. If you give the country name, if you give as an input, select this run button, it is going to hit the server. From the response, from the server, we got the response we got from the server in XML format. We got the response from the server. We got the response we got from the server in XML format. We got the response from the server. So this SoapUI tool, which is one of the best tool for testing your SOAP based web services, that is one thing. Second thing is nothing but by seeing this WSDL file, it's very difficult for us to understand what are the services it is providing here, what are the inputs we have to give, and what is the response we are going to get. It's very difficult it's very difficult to understand by following this WSDL XML file. That's why It's easily, if you want to understand, just use this SoapUI tool and give your WSDL file as the input for that SoapUI tool. You are going to get the list of services, what are the services it is providing, and if you select this particular request, even you can test the service whether this particular service is working or not. See, it is showing only one parameter we had to give as the input. India is a parameter I specified, country name, and we got the response we got from the server in XML format. We got the response from the server. So we got the confirmation now. What are the parameters we had to send, how many services it is providing here, in which format we are getting the response. That's why before going to start writing your code, it's preferred test your SOAP based web services by using a tool called what? SoapUI tool. Let's test the web service. Once if you get the confirmation, okay, I understand that what are the parameters I have to give, understand that what is the response I am getting. So then you can start working with the web services. You can start writing your the consumer side part to communicate with the web service. But the most important thing, if you want to communicate with the web service, the SOAP based web services, the first important thing you require what? WSDL file. If you have a WSDL file, then only you can communicate with the provider. Otherwise, you cannot communicate with the provider, you cannot communicate. Okay, okay, fine. So see here, the SoapUI tool, we tested the web service, we tested, we given the response we given, and from the server, we got the response we got from the server in XML format, we got the response from the server. But internally, what are the different steps are involved in this one to get the response on the server? We'll see now. We know that Java is maintaining the data in an objects format, right? In case of Java, the data is maintained in an object format, the data is maintained. So we cannot get the object. Let's take for example, we know that maybe everyone is aware of this one. In Java or in object oriented programming, the data is maintained in an object, the data is maintained, right? The object scope is nothing but one JVM. The object scope is what? In one JVM. Outside the JVM, we cannot get that object. We cannot get the object outside the JVM. We cannot get the object. Let's take for example, previous example. I want to send this country name. I want to send as a input to the provider. So we cannot send that direct Java object. You cannot send that country name. We cannot put on that object, and directly that object you cannot transfer to provider. The scope of the object is within that particular JVM. Outside the JVM, we cannot get the object. That's why we are having a concept called serialization. We are having a concept called serialization. Concept is there. Writing the object data into an output format called serialization in Java. So here, so we cannot get the object, we cannot get outside the JVM, we cannot get the object. So this object data, what we'll do is we'll write the data into an XML file. We understand that XML and JSON is a interoperable formats. So you can write the data in XML or JSON file, but SOAP web service will not support for JSON. SOAP support only what? XML file. So whatever the data is there in the object, let's write the data into an XML file. So I told you, right, this process, writing the object data into an output format, using a concept called file. We are writing the data into a file, we are writing the data, XML file. This concept is called as what? Serialization. This concept is called as what? Serialization. This concept is called as serialization, meaning what is the meaning of this statement is, boss, you cannot send the object, you cannot send to the provider directly. Whatever the data is there in the object, that object data, let's write into a file. Let's write into a file. So we choose an XML file, we choose because it's a readable. XML format is interoperable and readable. Okay, that's why we are writing the object data, we are writing into an XML file, we written the data. But if you send this XML file, if you send to the server directly, provider, if you send this XML file, there are some issues are there. Issues are nothing but there may be a chance of conflicts with the XML tags. There may be a chance of conflicts with the XML tags. That is one thing. Second thing is nothing but you cannot provide the meta information, you cannot provide about the XML tags, you cannot provide the meta information, you cannot provide about the XML tags. That's why directly this XML will not be transferred to the server. Whatever the data is there in the XML file, basically this XML file is going to classify into two parts. It's going to classify into two parts. The XML file is going to classify. One is the header part, second thing is the body part. One is what? Header, second thing is what? Body. This classification is called as SOAP. Clearly, I'll tell you once again because it's one of the most important interview question. What is meant by SOAP? SOAP is termed as Simple Object Access Protocol. SOAP is termed as Simple Object Access Protocol. It doesn't mean that it's like a protocol like HTTP, SMTP, FTP and protocols. If you send the XML file, if you send to the provider directly, there may be a chance of conflicts with the XML tags. That is one thing. Second thing is nothing but you cannot provide the meta information. Metadata means nothing but the data on data. Let's take it's not a right time maybe to discuss about the metadata. So the metadata, to provide the metadata about the XML file, the XML file is classified into two parts. The XML file is classified, one is the header part, second thing is the body part. Even if you take this SoapUI tool also, we tested the web series by using this SoapUI tool, right? Here you can find soap envelope, soap header, see soap header and soap body. Of course we have not given any header information, we have not given here, we given only body, we given here. Okay, to avoid the conflicts and to provide the meta information, the XML file is classified into two parts. The XML file is classified, one is the header part and one more thing is what? Body, header and body. This classification is called as what? SOAP. SOAP is also nothing but XML file only. Doesn't mean that it's a protocol like HTTP, FTP or FTP, these kind of protocols. SOAP is also nothing but what? It's XML. It's a classified XML. It's a classified XML, meaning XML file is classified into two parts, header part and body part. So this XML classification is called as what? SOAP. This XML classification is called as what? SOAP. Meaning, so directly XML cannot be transferred to the server, because to provide that meta information and to avoid the conflicts, the XML file is classified into what? Two parts. One is header part and body part. This classification is called as what? SOAP. This process, converting the XML file into SOAP XML file, converting the SOAP XML file, this conversion is called as serialization. SOAP serialization. We seen what exactly serialization means. Converting your object data into a output format, a file format, is called as serialization. A SOAP serialization means nothing but converting the XML file. SOAP serialization. I'll repeat once again the last time, that is, if you send the XML file, if you send to the server directly, there may be a chance of conflicts. You cannot provide the meta information, you cannot provide directly on the XML file. That's why the XML file is classified into two parts. The XML file is classified, one is the header part, second thing is body part. This XML classification is called as what? SOAP. SOAP is also nothing but an XML file only. Okay, so clear? So this process, converting object XML is called as serialization, converting XML to SOAP XML, this conversion is called as what? SOAP serialization. But directly we cannot send this SOAP XML, directly we cannot send to the provider. Hey provider, I'm throwing this SOAP XML file, let's catch that XML file. We cannot send that kind of thing, you cannot tell to the provider, right? Because the technology, right? So in case of technology, how the data is transferring, we are having some protocols, right? We are having some protocols like HTTP, SMTP, FTP, we are having some protocols. So this data directly we cannot transfer to the provider, we cannot transfer this data directly. This data we had to put into any one of the protocol. Let's take one of the most widely used protocol, that is nothing but HTTP, right? One of the most widely used protocol in the industry is what? HTTP. So what we have to do is this SOAP XML file we cannot transfer directly. So this SOAP XML file we had to put into HTTP request, we had to put. This SOAP XML we had to put into what? We had to put into HTTP request, we had to put this SOAP XML. This HTTP will transfer over the network. The server side, from the HTTP request, the server side technology will receive the SOAP XML. From this HTTP request, the server side, they will receive what? The SOAP XML file, they will receive the server end. At server end, the server side technology will receive what? The SOAP XML file, the server side technology will receive. From SOAP XML, the SOAP XML is going to be convert, meaning from that XML classification, header part and body part, they will convert this SOAP XML file, they will convert into XML format, they will convert. SOAP XML will be converted into what? Into again XML. So this process, meaning converting XML into SOAP XML, this process is called as what? SOAP serialization. Converting from SOAP XML to XML, this process is called as SOAP deserialization. This process is called as what? It's called as what? SOAP deserialization. Converting from SOAP XML to XML, this conversion is called as what? SOAP deserialization. Basically HTTP will transfer over the network. In the internet, HTTP will transfer over the network. From HTTP, the provider side technology will receive this SOAP XML file from the HTTP. From SOAP XML is nothing but which contains two sections, header part and body part. They will convert that SOAP XML file, they will convert into XML file, and finally from the XML file they will read the data and they will convert the data into their object format. They will convert the data. It may be a Java object or PHP object, or it may be Java to Java. The provider side, they will receive the XML file, they will receive at the provider end. Okay, from XML file they will get what? The object data they will get. So internally this process will happen, and this process converting from SOAP XML to XML is called as SOAP deserialization, and XML file to your object format. This conversion, this process converting the SOAP XML to XML, this conversion is called as deserialization. Converting what? The SOAP XML to XML, this conversion is called as what? It's a deserialization. Even the response also same thing. Even the response also, let's take, the provider wants to give some response. Okay, you made a request, if you want to make a request, first your object data is written into XML file, XML to SOAP XML and SOAP XML to HTTP request. In this way we are sending the data to a provider, we are sending the data. At the same time, provider wants to give some response to you or not. In the same way, provider wants to give some response to you, or you are expecting some response, you are expecting from the provider. How the response you are going to get, let's see here. In the same way, the data is maintained in an object, the data is maintained, let's take from provider end, you are expecting some response, you are expecting from the provider end, you are expecting some response. Let's see how you will get the response you are going to get. Here also same thing, the data is maintained in an object format, the data is maintained in an object format. So provider directly cannot send this object, the provider cannot send this object directly, the provider cannot send to the consumer, right? This object data, whatever is there, the object data, first this object data is going to be write into an XML format. Now the same format, I mean the same flow, but it's a reverse now. And now from a reverse, let's say what are the object data, that object data is going to be converted into an XML file first. Okay, so from XML to SOAP XML, object is going to convert into XML, XML to what? SOAP XML, XML is going to convert into what? Into SOAP XML file. From SOAP XML, receive the HTTP request, receive what? HTTP from the SOAP XML. The same process in reverse now, same process what we discussed. From HTTP, receive what? SOAP XML, from SOAP XML to XML, and XML to what? Convert into object. Convert this XML to what? Object will convert. So in this way the communication will happen. Okay, so if you are a mobile application developer, I mean we are talking about this Android application development, right? So in this Android application development, in this entire architecture, the mobile application developer responsibilities, this is a mobile application developer responsibility or functionality. Putting the data into HTTP request is the consumer part. Once you put the data into the HTTP and this is server side functionality, receive the HTTP request, from the HTTP request is all what? The provider end. This is the consumer end. The blue color line what is specified here, it's a consumer end, and the red color mark what I marked here, it's a provider part. In this entire consumer part, let's take putting the data into HTTP request. So up to this one is a consumer side part, consumer side functionality, and once if you put the data into HTTP request, and this is a server side, the server side functionality, receiving the HTTP request, from the HTTP get the XML, this is what? The provider side. Okay, even in this consumer has to focus only these three things: put the object into XML, XML to SOAP XML, SOAP XML to HTTP, receive the HTTP request, HTTP to SOAP XML, SOAP XML to XML, XML to object. This is what the consumer side functionality. Provider side we don't require, because we are a mobile application developers, how they are receiving that one, how they are doing all this process, it doesn't matter for a mobile application developer. In this communication, in this entire communication, this whole process, meaning for converting your object XML, putting the XML into SOAP XML file, putting the SOAP XML file into HTTP request, receive the HTTP request, and from the HTTP get the SOAP XML, from the SOAP XML to XML, this whole process, for doing all this process, we are having a ready-made library here for doing this entire process in Android application development. For doing this all this process, there is a library called Ksoap2 is a library. This Ksoap2 library will take care of for this entire process. For doing this entire process, the consumer part, for doing this entire process, who will take care? Ksoap2 library will take care of doing this entire process. Meaning you no need to do anything internals here for communicating with the SOAP based web services. Everything will take care of it. There is a library called Ksoap2 is a library. By using this Ksoap2 library, we can communicate with the provider, we can communicate. So if you want to communicate with the provider in Android application development, if you want to communicate with the provider, if you want to communicate, mainly we require two things. Mainly we require what? Two things. First thing is we have to know how to use Ksoap2 library. This is one thing. How to use what? Ksoap2 library for communicating with web service. This is one thing is required. How to use Ksoap2 library for communicating with what? Web service. This is one thing you have to understand. How can you use this Ksoap2 library for doing this entire process? How to use what? Ksoap2 library for communicating with web service. That is one thing. Second thing is, okay, you are using the SOAP based, the Ksoap2 library you are using for communicating the web service. We got the response we got from the server, like how we shown in the SoapUI tool here. You are going to get the response you are going to get from the server. In XML format, you are going to get the response from the server. But directly you cannot show this XML response, you cannot show to the user. Because user is not from the IT background, he don't know about XML, JSON and all these things, right? So we had to show the response in a user understandable format we had to show. So we are going to get the response you are going to get from the server. In a XML format, you are going to get the response from the server. That XML file, we had to read the data from the XML file. One thing, the Ksoap2 library is not making automation. That is, we got the response we got from the server by using Ksoap2. That response we are getting in XML format, we had to read the data from the XML file. This process is not automation. Automatically Ksoap2 library will not do that one, because Ksoap2 library is not having that sixth sense. Okay, in future someone is going to call my service, he wants to read the data, this particular record and all. So that's why it is giving up to XML file. From this XML file, whichever the data you want, you can read that particular data, you can read. So the second important thing you have to understand for communicating the SOAP services, that is read the data from the XML file. Read the data from the XML file. These two things we have to understand for communicating with the SOAP based web services. How to use Ksoap2 library. By using the Ksoap2 library, we will get the response in XML format. How to read the data from the XML file. So these two things we have to understand. So let's focus first on how to read the data from the XML file. We are having different XML parsers like DOM parser, a SAX parser, XML pull parser. We are having different XML parsers for reading the data from the XML file. In my next video, I'll explain about this, how to read the data from the XML file by using XML parsers. Then after that, after understanding how to read the data from the XML file, then we'll discuss how to use the Ksoap2 library. Okay, so thank you.